How do you think what culture gaming has changed since Ben and Peter's departure?
Hi guys, I'm Adam Wilborn from Whatculture.
And I'm Andy Murray from Whatculture, and you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
Subscribe below.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and today I'm back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by Scott Tailford from Whatculture Gaming. So welcome to the show, Scott.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. As we were just saying off camera, I'm very busy right now, but I'd rather be busy than I don't know what to fill up my days with right now.
At least things are returning now. There's lots of games. There's movies again. Batman's a thing. There's stuff.
Oh, again. If you've seen it, please don't spoil it because I haven't.
No, yeah, we got tickets for tomorrow night, so I'm looking forward to it. But no, I don't know anything right now other than Batman's in it. But yeah,
I've got to wait till next week, my friend.
Oh,
and
you got to avoid spoilers.
Oh, I hate life. But anyway. If we take this back to the beginning, everyone that I've interviewed when it comes to Whatculture has seemed to follow their biggest passion when it comes to the content they create or they help with creating. So is that the same for you with gaming, or is it sort of okay, I'll do this with the hopes of getting a foot in somewhere else?
Oh, no, it's definitely living and breathing video games for the longest time. I mean, it was, I had a Master System. That was my first console. Master System, Mega Drive, PS1, Game Boy, whatever. It was everything. But in terms of journalism stuff, it was used to work retail and then I went to university and did a media degree there. So did a few things in terms of maybe I'll get into advertising and stuff. And then I started kind of realizing that I can do journalism in terms of music reviews, because you can usually get on a music site and you can sort of do a few different reviews that way. And I started my own website and everything, so that was ticking over for a little bit because I'm big fan of hard rock and metal and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so that was doing nicely enough, but it was one of those things where there was just there's 1,000,001 music websites, and so I just kind of pivoted into doing games. And as soon as I started doing that, I immediately found more purchase in terms of different websites that were looking for specific writers, and I already had the knowledge base, I guess, so it was quite easy to sort of find things that you want to talk about, franchises, whatever. And then eventually I had enough of a portfolio between my website and a few others to sort of I just happened to notice that Whatculture were offering. They were listed on the Guardian's job page, so I applied through there, and then we're just here I am, I know many things, I've lived this life, and then just it went from there. So so they initially hired me as to do music coverage, but that was mainly just because my website was kind of music focused and stuff like that. And then it became, I was doing game articles anyway and film stuff, but the gaming ones just took off way more. So I became the gaming writer, and then became the gaming editor, and then hired some people in the gaming section, got bigger and bigger. But yeah, I've been there since the very end of 2013. So it's been
wow. So if we dig in, actually we'll dig into more your childhood love of games in a minute.
Cool.
But when it comes to select it, why do you think the video game ones blew up more than maybe the music ones?
Oh man, it's interesting because it's if you cut a wide swath across music coverage, then it's okay, what are your key terms? What are people searching for in the world of music? And that's usually going to be pop stuff, which is fine. But if you talk about what does a fandom respond to, then for me, if we're doing music coverage, that's going to be that's also going to be passionately talked about. Most of that is in rock bands, metal bands, it's the classic Megadeth versus Metallica thing. It's skewing it towards what's going to work. So it's weird when you approach music as a coverage thing, you as a way of covering all music, it's quite hard to drill it down and be okay, what are people actually going to click on or read or whatever. Whereas with gaming, you sort of know which franchises people are going to care about. You can say let's do predictions for the next Mass Effect, or you could, before Andromeda or something. And you can kind of do let's talk about Fallout 4, before that was confirmed, or GTA 6 or whatever. And you have these big talking points that, like, if you're self-identifying as someone who cares about video games, then you're going to know what those franchises are, and it makes it easier to sort of cast those nets and get people in. And so, and I think, if you grew up playing a lot of games, then you know what the talking points were. You remember how big a deal the PS2 was, and you know that doing like 50 PS2 games to play before you die has a very good chance that a lot of people will care about that. Whereas it's hard to do the music equivalent of that, unless you maybe do greatest rap songs of all time or something like that. Yeah. It's just different mediums, but I think, yeah, with gaming, it was kind of in me. Like I sort of, I mean, it's rare that I'm not talking about video games. So it was quite easy to be like, let's do as much of that as possible.
Do you think, and going back to the articles of music versus video games, do you think that is because music can sometimes be more subjective? Whereas if a game's great, it's more synonymous that a game's great. Whereas
kinda, I mean, yeah, like a lot of people talk about that. It's like, oh, like, everyone's personal music taste, and you can't possibly find a way in. But I don't know, I still really want to do Whatculture metal or Whatculture hard rock or whatever. I kind of want to really want to knuckle down on that stuff, because like you've talked to Andy Murray, like he's a massive metalhead, like he knows his metal inside out. And me and him talk about metal all the time, like Trivium, Slipknot, whatever it is. And he goes way heavier than that too. So whenever something comes up that is in that realm, you can like get those conversations going, kind of thing. And like I said, I think it's just trying to find those shared talking points. I think most people in music overall, they're just casual radio listeners. They just like a bit of music. It's a different thing to be like, music is part of my identity. And then it's a push and pull, because I think sometimes like people want to get involved in those conversations, like the best guitarist of all time or whatever. But I don't know. I think it's hard. I think gaming's getting there. Obviously, music is an older art form, and it's more mainstream. Like gaming's definitely getting there, but the amount of music that's out there, the radio hits, like the amount of background that music is, like it's just there to some people. Then it's kind of like a push and pull thing. But I think like I said, I think if you're into gaming, then it's part of your identity. And if you're into metal or rock or something, then it's kind of the same. And there's different things you can pull on to sort of get conversations going.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about gaming being part of most people's identity if they're a fan of it. So how did gaming become part of your identity?
God, it's just like, as long as that's the thing. I mean, my first console was the Master System, and one of my friends had a Mega Drive. My friend John, who I grew up with, who funnily enough is in the 1975. He's the saxophonist for the 1975.
Oh, really?
He's doing the toots left, right, and center. So yeah, he's doing that stuff. Me and him grew up together, and he had a Mega Drive, and I remember I went around to his house and we played Shinobi and Sonic and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, as soon as I finished seeing that, I went to my mum and I was like, I need this thing. Can we go get this system, this Mega Drive? Can we get one? And so we went to the Metro Center, which is like a Northeast supermarket, whatever, superstore around here. And I bought what I thought was a Mega Drive. I actually bought a Master System by accident, but it still had Sonic on it, so it wasn't too bad. And but that became my first console. But it was just seeing those things in motion, seeing Sonic, seeing Shinobi, the sound effects, like the overall music, the feel. It just kind of did something to me where I was just like, this just feels great. This is a fun thing, and it's a level above films, TV, passive entertainment. The more interactive something is, like, I mean, there's a whole conversation we can have about like the different ways that art forms work, but I genuinely think that video games are just the mecca of everything. I think that's a nexus of architecture, storytelling, script writing, cinematography, everything. I think it's everything together. And obviously back then I didn't know that stuff. The medium hadn't gone 3D yet, but I think that's what's maintained a love of it, is just seeing how things have evolved over time. But yeah, back then it was super early 90s stuff. That weird little blur over of like Mega Drive and Master System stuff. So yeah, that was just what got me in, was just sheer wow factor, I think, and Sonic the Hedgehog, I guess.
What was the biggest difference that you saw between the console your friend had and the console that you ended up buying?
Well, if you had the Master System, it wasn't I don't know if it was anywhere near as powerful as the Mega Drive, but it definitely was a step down. Like if you look at the version of Sonic that made it onto the Master System, it's less details. The sprite is like, the sprite of Sonic is less detailed. There are just less pixels in that thing. So it was just that weird feeling of like, have I bought the right thing? Like, this doesn't look right. But it still says it's Sonic, so I guess I'll do that. But yeah, just sheer visuals, I guess. But I remember it playing well, and I played a lot of Alex Kidd as well. Like these are all super ancient references, but like they actually just remastered Alex Kidd last year. But yeah, my first couple games on the Master System were Alex Kidd and Sonic the Hedgehog. Which I mean, I was like 5 or 4 or something. And it was like everything to me back then. But if you compare them now, they're massively different in terms of detail. Yeah,
I know that a lot of like the people that are passionate about the content that they make had a gap where they stopped watching wrestling, for example, stopped. We'll go with that. Stopped watching wrestling,
consuming it. Yeah,
consuming it basically. Did you ever have a period in your life where gaming came out of your life?
Funnily enough, no. No, it's always been there. Like it's always been the thing that I do every day. Like I mean, okay, so maybe there'll be a couple of days where I miss something if life gets in the way, but nah, it's always been there. Like I think I kind of have like a thing where if the industry itself is like big releases are more spaced out, like obviously the pandemic the last couple of years, big releases were more spaced out. Last year especially was you were kind of just waiting around for those talking points to come around before you can do things that'll get people talking again. And that might happen this year as well. Like obviously this year has been really front loaded with stuff, Elden Ring, Horizon, it's great. But after that, for the second half of this year, unless more stuff gets announced, it seems like it's going to be quite quiet. So it is that sort of thing of my mood tends to be, or my mood, like my general sort of energy tends
enthusiasm.
To be like, yeah, enthusiasm. And it's like, I'm always looking forward to the next big talking point. I want to get stuck in. I want to like see what's next. I want to see the new, different game mechanics, different genres, whatever else. And so, yeah, I've never actually taken a break from it longer than a few days, maybe like a week or 2 weeks, I guess, when I went on my honeymoon. But it's like, for the most part, yeah, there's always like something that I'm sticking to. And so, yeah, it's been a fixture of my life for, like 30 odd years now.
You talked about being married there and still having a big love of gaming. How do you balance like, okay, now, especially now that you work covering gaming, how do you balance like, okay, I'm going to have this is work, I'm going to have some game time, but I'm also going to spend time with my family. How do you balance it all?
Luckily enough for me, I married a massive nerd, which is just like me. So like my wife is a huge like comic fan, and like she's like just super respectful of like, hey, you have your own time, I have my stuff. I'm going to go read a bunch of comics, you can play some games. And we'll do some stuff like around that. We'll make some plans and like we're just honest with each other about wanting to do the things that we love. And my wife's got a whole bunch of other hobbies and stuff that she wants to get stuck into as well. So there's kind of always something else that she's like, I'm cool going and doing this thing if you want to finish this game. And it depends what it is. Like some stuff in terms of like review coverage, like Horizon, I got that early for review. So that was like, okay, I'm going to be head down on this thing for the next few days. And that's kind of me. Not like in terms of shutting people out or anything, but I think but there's like a level of like respect there, which is like really, really welcome.
Yeah.
It's just lovely. So that's just been great. Like, yeah. And it's like I said, if she's just like a couple of years ago, she got super into Stardew Valley. So it was like every other night, it was like, I'm going to go play Stardew. So I was like, okay, that's fine. You go do that. I'll go play something else. And we kind of tandem in that way, which is nice. So she's been super supportive. One of the reasons that I even started making that pivot from music journalism to gaming journalism was when we were first dating. She was like, well, you talk a lot about video games. You seem to know your stuff. You should probably see if there's any openings in that regard. And it was just that light bulb moment of like, oh yeah, I probably should see if there's anything going in that regard. And like that helped like pivot across. So yeah, man, she's incredible. It's been like super supportive, super helpful. And in that regard of like time allocation, like I said, marry a nerd, man. It's you want to get someone who's like respectful of like, you're going to go do this, I'm going to go do that.
Yeah. Or by the sound of it, just marry someone that's similar interests to you, because you can understand then that like, okay, I'm going to go watch this, you go do your thing, sort of thing.
And it's like you like they more than understand the me, I don't know, memorizing. Like when I found out that she hadn't played Final Fantasy VII, I was like, well, we need to sit down and go through Final Fantasy VII, or we need to sit down and go through Metal Gear Solid, or we just finished Undertale because she tried Undertale back in 2016. She didn't finish it. So we went back to that. So it's like, it's those things have been like, I think if I was with someone who didn't get it in terms of like, I don't know, me being like, this is an essential piece of entertainment, or this is something that I think you'd really enjoy. I think if I was with someone who was entirely like sports focused and that was their identity, I think we'd clash a lot more. Or at least you'd have that thing where you're like, I need you to understand why I'm playing Elden Ring till 2:30 a.m. every single night for the last week. Things
It's like my girlfriend doesn't get wrestling at all,
right.
but she understands that it's a big passion of mine. So she'll happily sit and watch it with me just to almost keep me happy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Just show Orange Cassidy. That'll get people in. Everyone
I did. So slowly, as we say, I'm getting her into things. But then on the flip side, I think it's more about you finding that compromise, isn't it? Like,
I think if you were like, determined to be like, I am just going to wall myself off. I'm just going to play this over and over again. There's a level of respect that you have to have for another person in your life. Like it goes both ways or whatever. But I think that, I've never actually thought about it too much, but I guess the reason we work so well is that we fell into those slots and it works really well. Yeah.
What about like how do you balance then? Because when I put up a clip of my interview with Adam Wilborn, we gave you a shout out because of the fact that you're on deadlines a lot. So this is how that came together, to be honest, guys. So how do you balance then like gaming for fun and then like, okay, I've got to know the minutiae of this game because I've got to review it for work?
It's funny because nearly everything is going to get regurgitated through work at some point. Like it's going to manifest in like an editorial video, a news video, like one of the podcasts that we do. Like I'm on 3 podcasts a week, so it's like whatever I'm playing is going to come through anyway. So I'm nearly always in that mindset of, I am playing everything for fun. It is still a video game. It's still a piece of entertainment. There's that side of it. But I like analyzing something. I like knowing the pros and cons, like what works, what doesn't. I love the minutia of video game design. Give me, like the most specific AI, like this god does this thing, this enemy does this thing, and that's why this happens and whatever else. Like I love all that side of it. There is that mindset though that you get put into when you have to review something where it's like, okay, you've been given code, you have like, if you're lucky, a few days. It's rare that you get more than that. But sometimes you do, maybe you get like a week or something. And then it's like, okay, I know what I'm aiming for. I know when the video or the article has to be done by. So then it just becomes a case of the thing is, if I'm assigning a score, then I think there's a whole minefield of subjectivity and objectivity and like, how do you say that this work is worth this score versus just me going, I think it's a cool game because I like old Nintendo and that's why I like this. Like, I think that it's different if you're presenting it to like a mainstream audience. There has to be a sort of marker of down the middle quality. Like it has to, if you're ascribing a score to something, then it starts getting more objective. Like for me, I start analyzing, what were the developers aiming for? How much did they achieve? And like whether or not it is actually responsive in terms of controls or it's actually responsive in terms of animation. I start getting more clinical in that regard. But I think you should split those things. Like, I think there's a way to say that whatever game is the best game of all time. And then there's a way of saying that it's my personal favorite game of all time. And I think they're different things.
So like, how do you in some ways then differentiate between, say, for example, my favorite game of all time is Simpsons Hit and Run.
Nice.
I just love that game. I don't know why.
We like do a whole. We thought that was going to get confirmed for a remaster a few years ago. There was a leak that had happened that pointed to because there was like 2 or 3 guys that used to work on The Simpsons were going to be at a Fox panel at E3 that year. And there was like a leak that they had something to announce and it was like a beloved property or whatever. And then the internet did its thing and everyone was like, oh my God, it's finally happening. Simpsons Hit and Run. Because I love that game too. I think a lot of people do of like our age or whatever, like grew up with that thing and it's awesome.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't the remaster and everyone just kind of went, oh,
I was like,
but why is that game not available? Yeah. It was just like, that thing should be available a lot more than it is. But in terms of Simpsons Hit and Run, we just had that as a thumbnail on one of the videos because it was, I forgot what the name of the title was now. It was something like games that were way better than they had any right to be or something like that. And it's like no one going into Hit and Run expected it to be this incredible, almost GTA level thing, but it's great. So
my initial point of that was like, I know that's not the greatest game of all time objectively. I just find it really fun. So how do you differentiate between, okay, this is a game that I really enjoy to this is a game that is enjoyed by the masses because of X, Y, Z?
I think there is like some blend over. I think it's just weird. It's just sort of having played enough stuff, you can identify like markers of quality. You can identify when something is going to go down well with the mainstream, or when something is out and out recommendable. Like the last game that, like, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff. Like I can, like something like God of War, the 2018 reboot. I think that, you know, I gave that 5 stars. I think that's absolutely a recommendable, pristine product of a piece of entertainment that you could give almost anybody and they'd get something out of it in a positive sense. And I think you can go down all those metrics of like graphical quality and the animation responses and how it feels to play and all those kind of things, without saying it's my personal favorite thing, which is different to something like Celeste, which is a really great breakdown of anxiety and depression. You play a character who doesn't necessarily realize that they are suffering from those things. It's just a platformer in terms of what you're doing, but you're coming up against this other version of yourself and battling them, and then you realize that it's actually a visual representation of your darkest self, and you have to overcome that. And it's this really great metaphorical breakdown of that condition. I was like, this is incredible. And there's an objective measure to that, you know, but there's also the fact that just through people that I know, like some personal relations and relatives that I have, that elevated it on a personal level where I was in bits by the end of that game. I was like, this is incredibly powerful, but I know that someone else isn't going to get that. So you'd have to drill it back down to, okay, but the platforming is tight, the level design is tight, the intent behind the story is worthwhile. But there's that extra level of like, but it did hit me on like another level in a completely subjective way. I think that it's interesting and it's always case by case. But there's some games that just have that extra, like I said, something like a God of War, where you can kind of just hold it up and go, this is a 5-star game and everyone should see it or play it. And there's always going to be weird outliers. There's always going to be weird blendovers with objectivity and subjectivity and whatever. But I love those discussions. I love the way that they go. That's like I said, the minutiae of all that stuff is why I love talking about games nonstop.
You can tell how passionate you are about gaming just by this brief conversation that we've had so far. But if that passion waned, or like you just woke up one day and was like, I don't like gaming anymore, would you have to stop creating content on it?
Well, the thing is, I think I have that thing in me where I just love, like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I love so many different types of entertainment, but it mostly drills down to movies, TV, and games. But I always just love I always love conversations with my friends growing up about whatever we were watching, whatever we were playing. And so I kind of have that innate thing in me where I want to get people together and do like a podcast, do whatever version I can do of a bunch of friends talking about something, which is why I love podcasts so much and podcasting so much as well. Yeah. So I think like I would do some version of that. Like, I mean, whether it was if gaming went away, if the industry just became so completely microtransaction soulless and everything was the same, and we never got any Elden Rings, and all we got was the same sequels over and over again, then yeah, maybe that would lead to me taking a break and doing something else. I mean, I started out doing like photo restoration. I use Photoshop a lot, and I was going to do a whole business on taking old photos from people who maybe they've been torn up or whatever, and slowly putting them back together. I was going to sell. That was going to be my initial thing years ago. And I would maybe take a complete clean break from entertainment if I needed to get away from it altogether. But I think, you know, if let's assume that the other mediums are still good, then, you know, I would do film stuff, TV stuff. I might even do wrestling stuff. Who even knows if AEW keeps going as good as it's going, then that might be like a worthwhile pivot. But it would take something demonstrable, I think, for me to disconnect from gaming. Like the next step for me would be getting on the coding side, on the developer side, and make something. But that's way in the future.
Yeah. No, I was just curious to know, because a lot of the wrestling guys I've spoke to have said, I can't watch wrestling at home now because I've become so burned out on it because there's so much of it. And then when Adam Wilborn said about you having like 4 a.m. deadlines and stuff like that, or whatever I can't remember the exact phrase, but I
think he might have been talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake when we had that. I only had a few days to beat it, and I stayed up. That was one of the worst examples of this, but I stayed up until 4 a.m. to beat that thing, and then I had the embargo at like 11 o'clock the next morning. So it was like I beat it, slept for like 3 hours, and then recorded my review, and then gave that to one of our editors. We slapped some footage into it, and then that went online. So that was like it's rare that you have to aim for that stuff, but that was what that was.
What is like something regarding the way gaming content is created that maybe consumers wouldn't understand?
I don't know, because I guess it gets really like because you have to play into, well, it depends, because when I started Whatculture, it was all very website. It was entirely website focused. We hadn't launched YouTube yet. Like I was in those initial meetings about like we should probably do YouTube stuff, to be honest, because YouTube's a bit of a thing. And you know, realizing getting that off the ground and getting the initial people for that, and the dudes that became Cultaholic, like obviously we were all friends and everything, but they were not friends now. But like they went and did all that stuff. But like those were the guys that initially did all the video side of things. But in terms of the way that those things were being made on the article side and the website side, you were curating all of it towards Google, because it was all about Google page rank. It was all about, okay, what terms are being searched for, you know, do all those things, which is kind of transplanted across into how YouTube works, where it's just like, okay, what are the, you know, what trends are going to happen? What are people going to be searching for? Right now, everyone's searching for Elden Ring, so it makes sense to go and do some Elden Ring stuff. And so I think people are probably aware that you have to play into that stuff, but different sites do it to different degrees. We've pivoted our stuff across the last decade or so just because we have so much on the video side now. But yeah, there's all that stuff. I think that it's just a case of like thinking, like specific phrasing, like just ways, like literally the specific order of words will affect what order you're going to be in on Google and things like that. And so there's loads of little minutiae things like that that are just really finicky. And you don't really realize how many you've got stored in your head in terms of the rules until you take someone else on, someone who's brand new, and they go, oh, can we talk about this? And I'm like, yes, but it needs to go through like 3 filters to become like a headline or a video or whatever. So it's a lot of those kind of things. It's a lot of like filtration systems before you, but you like ostensibly you can talk about whatever you want. It's just a case of like making it work. We kind of had that this morning, actually. Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of, that's the thing. Everyone always talks about like playing into the algorithm and all this stuff with you know, like all the ways that all that stuff has worked on YouTube, and people not doing a video that they might want to do, or titling it differently, or getting screwed over by the algorithm because YouTube boosted something else or whatever. Yeah, we kind of had that this morning we've just done a Gran Turismo 7 review, but we couldn't think how to title that because most of our audience don't, or assumedly wouldn't, respond to a driving video. But we were just like, well, it's 25 years of Gran Turismo. We played a lot of it when we were kids. We've dabbled in it over the years. How the hell do we title this thing that boils down to, hey guys, let's talk about Gran Turismo for a bit? And we eventually drilled that down to like, you know, Gran Turismo 7, it's like a review and it's got like a lot of pros, but there's like one con, so we should phrase it that way. But those conversations happen every single morning with every single news story, everything.
So how, with the pandemic, you spoke about games not being released as quickly and stuff like that. If by some horrible, I nearly said miracle then, no, that's the wrong word, horrible thing of fortune, that the gaming industry was still basically as slow as it is, how difficult do you think it would be to create content, and how difficult was it to create content in the early days of the pandemic?
It is actually, we're like weirdly quite good at Whatculture in terms of we don't, like, we're not an IGN, a GameSpot, a whatever, insert any website, who are basing a lot of their coverage around that review, like specifically, like that is their main way they make money. Like they're looking forward to that one burst of coverage because that's where all the search terms are, and they can, you know, aim for that one thing. I'd like to think that we've got a nice community that just is excited about video games overall, and even if it's down to the most minutiae thing, like I'm replaying, I was replaying Resident Evil 4 the last couple of weeks, and I was just sort of playing through that, and I was doing, I don't know if you've played RE4, but there's like a bit in that where you have to take care of one of the NPCs, and it was like at the time it was this big thing about like, oh my god, you've got to escort this character and how annoying is it, etc. And I remember that conversation at the time, but going back through it, I was like, this isn't anywhere near as bad as I remember it being. And I was like, I kind of feel like I should do a video on this. So it's like you can do those little like things, and it's like, you know, so that might become a video of like you know, 10 old school gaming complaints that were total BS or whatever, and it becomes something else, but it gives you an excuse to talk about it. And I think if there's always a audience of just receptive gamers or knowledgeable gamers, then everyone responds to that. Obviously you need to go wide to keep everything going and keep the lights on and everything, but you can have those really like pristine specific conversations if it's phrased the right way. And none of that is reliant on a new release. Like Resident Evil 4 was 2004. Like nearly every time I go back to something, I think of like why I liked it, what's cool about it, whatever. Then that becomes the topic that we then do another list on or another editorial point or whatever it is.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So like with gaming being such a not even old industry, but like with things being able to be recycled, content is maybe made easier.
I think it's just like I always just literally think of it as like, well, if you were hanging with a bunch of game playing friends, which is who I always grew up with, then what would you guys be talking about? You might be talking about the latest release, but it might also make you think of something from a few years ago or when you were a kid or whatever. And then you go, remember that was really funny. That thing remember when we killed that boss with that weapon, whatever it was. I'm talking in vagaries, but like, it's those things and it's all those conversations and it's that energy and that passion. Like, that's what I love. And I'm just like, I think that's always been why Whatculture's worked. I mean, like, I've built Whatculture Gaming. Like, there was a section before I arrived, but like, I'm not to toot the old horn, but like, in terms of the website, the YouTube, the podcasts, like, I've been there. And
I've got questions about that in a minute, if that's okay.
Right, cool. And it's like, imbuing a lot of that stuff in terms of like, let's just be a bunch of people who know their stuff, a bunch of knowledgeable nerds talking about games they love is like all it needs to be. And that's thankfully gone pretty big.
You talked about earlier on going to your bosses and saying, we need to get on this YouTube thing. Yeah. What was your initial thought process of like, okay, we've got a website, we need to go onto YouTube?
Well, I just thought because I grew up on Giant Bomb. I don't know if anyone's a Giant Bomb fan, but I grew up on Giant Bomb, which was made by Jeff Gerstmann, Vinny Caravella, Brad Shoemaker, and Alex Navarro, who left GameSpot in like 2006-ish, maybe earlier than that. And they like left GameSpot over like a disagreement over a review, and they formed their own thing. And the way that they did video content was just like hit record, and just whatever's happening that day is like what you do. And so they had a lot of like behind the scenes style videos. They had a lot of just, let's show the games we're playing. Let's just have these cool conversations about these games in whichever way we can. And I just love that approach because, like I said, it's a bunch of knowledgeable nerds talking about games they love, and they were funny and they were informative and they were great. And so when the time came to have those conversations about like embracing YouTube, I was like, well, let's get us out there and let's talk about games. Like you can have us presenting the lists. You can have us talking about these things. I wasn't the only person saying it, but like, it was definitely, I mean, Whatculture was so much smaller back then. It was like 5 people or something. But but it was like, we should do that stuff. Like I can hop in front of a camera and talk about games. And the old videos are terrible. I've come a long way, even though I'm not anything incredible now, but oh my God, the old versions are bad. But like that whole thing of person who knows thing can talk about thing is the absolute nexus of YouTube, is the crux of YouTube. So it's like,
oh no.
There you go, maybe.
Frozen. Hang on. Oh, that's. Is that on your end or my end? Hang on. Is that better?
Wait a minute, I can hear you in little bits. Yeah, that seems better. I'm just doing a speed test, so I've got about 60, 70 meg down, so that should be okay.
I don't know what that was.
It said recording in progress again. No.
Anyway.
Hopefully it got whatever the hell I said anyway.
So you were talking about setting up the YouTube channel. I will edit it and make it look nice again.
Cool.
But like you were talking about setting up the YouTube channel and the fact of presenting lists and stuff like that. So then where does it come then? Like, I need some help with this sort of thing.
Those things just kind of happened naturally because like the bosses were hiring more people, and obviously as those conversations, I mean, we moved offices and they hired more people to help out on the video editing side. That became like, somewhere in there, I can't get the exact dates, but somewhere in there, Jules came on board because he started doing his own voiceovers and his own stuff from home. And then you got Peter Austin, you've got Ben Potter, and that was like the first gaming era in terms of like they all came in and we were like the first gaming team, and that stuff was great. And then it was just that thing of like, hey, do you know games? Cool, we should do this stuff together. And those really early videos were just me and Peter initially. You can see all that stuff still on the channel. 2015-ish, I think it'll be, maybe 2016. Which is all just me and Peter doing E3 predictions, doing news, whatever. It was kind of just like Because it was another thing that I'd said to the bosses, like, look, we should do little news clips. We should weigh in on whatever that's happening in the news and just see if it works. And they were up for giving things a chance. So, and everything was proven in terms of it had worked on the wrestling channel. So why not do it for gaming? And so I just kind of grabbed Peter and and we kind of just did stuff together. Like one day he might be like, we should talk about this. I would be like, we talk about this. And those things, it just kind of worked. It's very like nerd fueled, where it was just like, we have cameras, we have access to a YouTube channel, we have an audience, videos are responding well on the list side, we should try other stuff. And that just kind of became like that first team thing. And things kind of just went from there.
How do you think What Culture Gaming has changed since Ben and Peter's departure?
Well, they were a massive creative force. Like they're lush, like they're genuinely brilliant. Like, I mean, yeah, they were like, I have a million memories with them. It's funny. There was like one day when I felt when I saw this first, I was hanging out with Ben and I noticed a Splinter Cell figure. It was like a Sam Fisher figurine. And we were just hanging out. I was like, that's a really cool figure or whatever. And I think he's like, oh, I've got that at home. Like I got it as some collector's edition thing or something. And I was like, oh, really cool. That's awesome. And I didn't think anything of it. And then months later, it was my birthday. And I was just in the office and it was on my desk with a ribbon on it. And it had like happy birthday. And it was like, from Ben. I was just like, and I was like, that's so nice of you. And it was just little things like that where I was like, I mean, we got on really well. Like the content was really fun to make. I think I said this to them when they were like planning on leaving and were getting ready to leave. I was like, you guys, you could tell that they were like a 2 and they were perfect as a 2. And it would make more sense for them to go off and do stuff as a 2. So like, I was always like 110% supportive of them. Like they had such a great chemistry. I was always telling them that, like, it was just like, you guys are the 2. And so like, in terms of what's changed, like, it's just that we're missing them. Like we went off and did other stuff. But I think that they are so valuable as Ben and Peter, that they can go off and do those things too. So we like pivoted. There was obviously like, there was the whole, I think of it in terms of like eras. So it's like, you had like me, Jules, Ben and Peter went off to go and do their thing. Me and Jules obviously stayed behind, and then things pivoted a little bit more where Josh and Ewan and Rich, Ash and Rach, they all started getting on camera more. And then we became like this whole other thing that became like this. We had this really like nice run for like 3 years or whatever until the pandemic, basically, of like doing team videos. Like we were like a proper team, like a wider, bigger team. And so that's the main thing that changed, is just literal personnel. But in terms of like, I guess, a content feel, Ben and Peter are hilarious. So like, we had to, like, there's something that only they could bring to the channel in the first place.
Yeah. It's like, were you worried at any point when, after their departure, that like maybe the channel wasn't going to get as many views? Because a conversation I had with Andy Murray was like, when the Cultaholic crew left to go to do Cultaholic, he was like, how are we going to do this? Because Ben and Peter had made the Cultaholic crew had made the What Culture channel their own. And it was like, how do we establish an identity without them? Was that something similar?
I think not necessarily, because I think that all those guys like Pacitti and the guys that became the Cultaholic lot, they were such a seismic force in like wrestling coverage. Like, you know, like they were like, I mean, they're incredible at what they did, and like they are still now. But when during that specific period, there was such a specific energy around them and everything. And so like, yeah, when they left, it was like noticeable. But I think in regards to like a comparison to gaming, like the gaming channel just wasn't what the wrestling channel was. Like obviously wrestling was doing all the Bullet Club stuff and all the like the feuds between the Atoms, and they had like this, they had all those things going on, and King Ross and all that kind of stuff. And so they had like all these big larger than life personalities, whereas like we were kind of just still a bunch of nerds, like me, Ben, Peter, Jules. We were just the ones doing the gaming coverage. It wasn't as we weren't chasing kayfabe stuff in the way that they were, to put a word on it. And so it was kind of just, we just kind of cracked on. Me and Jules were like really close friends. So like when we became closer friends, when he was in person and he moved up and stuff to Newcastle. And so we were just kind of like, we wished them well, and we'll just do the slight crossover in terms of when Josh did his first video was as Ben and Peter were leaving, so we kind of had a crossover anyway, to like the new staff coming on, and you know, and being able to hop in the show and do stuff with the new people, and then that just became more and more. Like Josh is so knowledgeable, like he's incredible. I can grab him for anything and just do any video with him seriously. But there was like a nice little sort of transition And we sort of knew that like just the way that everything works in terms of the scripts and the articles and everything else, there's enough there as a bedrock of quality that's going to carry forward. So it was just like, yeah, we kind of just did it. It's only when you think back on it that you're just like, oh yeah, I guess like there was like a noticeable
That was a big
change,
thing.
but yeah, exactly. You kind of just roll with it in the moment because you're just like, well, it's a job. It's 9 to 5. I've got to do this stuff. So let me write these articles and cover the industry, and hopefully it works.
So, I think my connection's gone again.
You frozen again.
Is that better?
Zoom.
I hate Zoom.
I can see Zoom is the Emmy.
Right. So we were saying about how what culture's changed and stuff, and then like, you said that it had all changed again because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, that stuff was just a case of, I mean, it was everything like the flow and stuff, and everything is again.
Oh, flub. All right, it's working again now.
Yay.
Is it?
Okay, I think so. Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, you're coming through smooth again now. It's just because you froze again before.
Right. Let me try this. Disconnect and shit. See if that works.
I think so. Yeah, you can definitely hear me now. You're coming through on video.
Yeah, cool. So, as we said, you said that things changed. Oh, it's gone again.
I know.
Right. So what I might do is, because we've got some good stuff, is we'll wrap this up with a segment that I call generic questions and my question that I end all my interviews on. So,
okay,
generic questions with favorite game of all time.
Favorite game of all time is the original Metal Gear Solid on PS1. It just absolutely blew me away. It was such an incredible cinema experience, and anything like that at the time. Obviously, it revolutionized the industry itself anyway. Feat, and I remember I finished and started. So yeah, the first Metal Gear Solid. I can go through that. I know every line of dialogue in it. I love all the way the cutscenes are directed, the characters, the way it feels, just everything. The original Metal Gear Solid, it's close with Final Fantasy VII, but the original Metal Gear would be way up there.
Favorite game franchise of all time?
My mind went to Yakuza there. I absolutely love the Yakuza series. I absolutely love like old school martial arts movies. I love how crazy over the top a lot of their plot twists are and their characters. Kazuma Kiryu is a great character, excuse me. And I love the spin-off series that they've started doing, the Judgment games, but I think the second one of them is probably going to be the last one. But just that world, the way that Ryuga Gotoku make those games, they're just so chunky. The melee is so responsive and fun. I love Japanese stuff, so I love wandering the streets in those games and like going eating all the food and doing the random battles and everything. And I think the stories are always just so consistently fun. There's always some stupid plot twist of like your dead brother's still alive, or that clone is after you, or whatever. And there's always like something like that. That are just really fun. I think it's that Metal Gear Kojima twist thing inside me that makes me yearn for big dumb stories, and Yakuza delivers every single time.
Favorite video game character of all time?
Interesting. I think I don't know, man. I'm just gonna have gut feeling. My mind served me up Dante from Devil May Cry. Now I don't know how.
This is what it's supposed to be. Literally first thought.
So yeah, I'll go Dante. I always thought he was the coolest dude. I love the whole red leather jacket, albino, twin pistols, cocky guy. Like I liked his whole persona in Devil May Cry 3, where they really doubled down on him being this like super stylish vampire style guy. So yeah, I'm gonna go Dante, even though my brain should probably think it through more, but I'll go Dante.
If you were a video game, if your life was a video game, what would it be about?
Probably some sort of like managerial, weird, moving the pieces and hope they fit style thing, because a lot of my life for the last few years has been managing the gaming section and looking after the stuff that we're going to be covering. And then I dip in on everything. So I'm always like, I'm like this weird like crossroads for like everything in terms of like the podcast, the editorials, the news, whatever it is. So I don't know if you've ever played Game Dev Story, but that's like a game just about like managing the coding side of things. I guess it would just be that, but for like hashtag content or something, where I'm just like, we think projected views are this, and we think that this is worth doing, but this is going to make a loss, so we need to do this. And it would be that thing. It'd probably be boring as hell, to be honest. But like every now and then you'd get to talk about something you love, like Horizon or whatever that comes out.
And then as we wrap this up, Scott, because I do want to be respectful of your time, the question I end all my interviews on is, with YouTube, with podcasting, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of way. So what is the one video or podcast that you want the good people to check out? And then what is to know your work? And then what is the one that you're like, okay, I've grown a lot since then. If you could not check that one out, I would appreciate it.
The one that I'm the most proud of is by far, it's called Red Dead Redemption 2 is about the death of Rockstar. And it was just this feeling that I had playing through Red Dead 2 about how, because it's written entirely, well, not entirely, but it's largely written by one of the guys that founded Rockstar, Dan Houser, who's now left Rockstar. And he just sort of, the whole game is about the sort of death of lawlessness, this whole thing about, what we used to get away with as a bunch of outlaws versus this emergence of America and judicial systems and ways to behave and all that kind of stuff, and how they don't fit anymore. And it was almost like this, it's like he's doing this thing through the game of like what Rockstar are as a company. Like GTA has changed what it used to be for what it is now. And I just loved all that stuff. So I did this video, this like big long editorial essay thing on how Red Dead 2 is like this big metaphorical conversation talking point on the death of Rockstar as what they used to be in terms of the hot streak they had across the 2000s. And so I'm really proud of that. Like, it was edited by Osley Beatty, who was one of the best editors we ever had. And he's over at Traxian Games now. But and so it was like he knew Rockstar inside out. So when I went to him and started describing the angle, he was like, totally get it. And he just nailed the edit as well. His footage choices were brilliant. His cuts just spot on. And in terms of something to avoid, just I just laugh at old stuff, but it would just be anything that we did back in the day. If you go on the channel and order by oldest first and just see what old random toss you can find that has me in it, there'll be some really old Birmingham game show stuff that a guy called Rob used to do, and then there'll be stuff that I'm on that is just terribly voiced. I'll barely be in control of my own volume. It'll just be an absolute mess. So anything old, you can go and have a laugh with, but it's not representative of where I'm at now, thankfully.
Fair enough. So as we wrap this up, guys, where can the good people find you, Scott?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can just I was gonna say Google my name, but I'm on Twitter as @/LP89. You can just check out Whatculture Gaming. We do daily news videos, or as much as we possibly can anyway. And just come find me on Twitter, come find me on YouTube. Come talk about games. There's a lot of them, and they're all good. So it's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow me on Twitter @TomTalksRubbish, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye.